I'm actually a PERS person. I'm not here about the PERS, though. I recognize that we've gotten into a situation where our tax system and many other things are really unequal. And while I don't think PERS should be taking a cut, I am concerned about education. But to have this bill about restricting local rights in a bill that's about funding education.
It's not in the same bill, it's its own separate bill.
Right, but what?
But yes, it's the same package. The governor has said that he will not sign any one without signing them all.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that means if he approves of one, he approves of all?
In this particular group they've been negotiating, he has said, if any one of them fails, I veto all of that.
What's the rationale behind that?
Trying to get government unstopped and get something done, unlike the federal government, and saying that we're going to work with the Democrats and Republicans to have a plan that brings us together around stuff that a lot of people don't like and a lot of people do like, and but all of which need to happen if we're going to get all Oregon solvent in the future. That's what his belief is about this.
What does having, genetically modified foods, destroying organic crops have to do with getting Oregon solvent?
When different people are in a room, they have different interests. In order to get enough people to vote for those bills, you have to bring other kinds of things in. So when one person takes off something out of the PERS package, the other group is going to offer something back in that's important to them. So out of the interests of that, you get that kind of decision. And I actually don't believe that in the long run, if we actually do it right with 633 and the state takes over control, we can have just as much individual choices, but we have a conversation with people and scientists and others at our state level who we hire to make rational decisions about which ones. Sweet corn, for example, the radius of cross-pollination is about 2 feet because of the way seed grows and the way pollen is distributed with corn. Different for brassicas. But there's a whole lot of studies about how much space you need between crops to create the event of cross-pollination in others. And that's the issue you're talking about when it comes to genetically modified crops. Because that's really the big difference is, can they pollinate with other kinds of things in the same family? And the truth is, they can. It's been proven that it does.
And we don't have a history of disclosure of where those crops are. And
we do in the valley, because in the valley they have a registry where everybody has to register what they're doing. And do I think that should happen across the state? Absolutely. I had a bill that we were trying to get last time that would indicate where things are grown and who's growing them so people understand what can and can't be grown next to each other, because I think that's really important. I actually really do. And the valley did it because of the seed productions in the valley. And even though a lot of them are organic, certain ones can't grow next to each other because they're close enough in the family that they would cross-pollinate. So the issue is we should be doing that across the state, and every locality you should be able to know what farm is growing what kinds of things and where they are.
But this is such a unique issue because it is irreversible. These other decisions that may be made can go are things that we can go back and fix. And in terms of what we're doing, messing with genetics, this is something that is irreversible.
But since Mendel decided we could mess with genetics, we've been messing with genetics. I can actually make I can actually make everything.
Let's clarify that a little bit.
I can make if I have enough time and effort, anything that they've done with GMO products, you can do pretty close by modifying little bits over time until you get there.
That's completely different than genetically engineering, though. What you're talking is using cultivars. You're using cultivars for breeding, and that's completely different than genetically modification. So let's let her finish, because I think she has a pretty good point.
Right. We're taking different species and we're combining them in unique and unusual ways, and you do not undo that in the environment.
And you can't fully research all of it either.
Unintended consequences.
The only reason that genetically modified crops are being modified is so they are resistant to the herbicides and pesticides that they use. There's absolutely no proven benefit to them. It's just...
That's not entirely true. There's one that's, there's a genetically modified orange that's now being produced because because the orange crop in Florida is going away. 30% of the year the trees are all dying in Florida because of a disease that's come in from another country. And we assume we won't have oranges in Florida in the next 25 years if we don't do something. And so a person did genetically modify an orange to put in it a spinach gene, which resists the bug. So it's not about herbicides, it's about not using as much herbicides. So there are benefits. It's just we haven't necessarily seen. What we've seen is certain companies making it off of their Roundup or whatever it is. And I understand that portion.
Do you mind if we let Maria finish her little thought there? 'Cause I think she was on a pretty good.
The large majority of modifications have to do with making them resistant to the herbicides that are then dumped in incredible amounts over crops. Dust of that affects people. The people are not being told, now we're going to spray, please stay away. No respect for them. How is that possible? That a company gets away with doing that, at the expense of the people who live there.
It's not a company that's doing it. It's a local farmer that's putting those chemicals on them.
Boo.
They made a decision.
But
Boo.
the herbicides are made by this company who is pushing them very aggressively.
I understand that.
And how can someone be for that bill that is harming people in such a serious way? In Argentina, the whole country has turned from raising beef to raising genetically modified soybeans. Now, the people that live in the country that have always lived there are full of cancer. Their children are full of birth defects.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is you're talking about Oregon, where we don't have big industrial farms. We have family-owned farms almost exclusively. I think there's one big milk producer that's pretty big at 3 Mile Canyon. But most of them are individual farmers on family farms that have been working these projects for a long time, making decisions about their property. And, we have as many sesquicentennial farms as any state. That's 150 years, same family on the same piece of land, making choices for them and whether their farm is going to be viable. And I believe they should be given the choices. And I just think that from my perspective, I voted for the bill before. I will probably be voting for it again. I understand your concerns. I just haven't seen any scientific evidence of what you're saying is happening. And the other part is they use less pesticides now than we've ever used before.
That is so statistically untrue,
And we'll send you information.
I would love to have that information.
And the pesticide that they are using, the class of pesticides persist in the environment, so they accumulate.
Roundup?
Absolutely. The gypsophosphate, the whole class of chemicals is terribly persistent.
Most of them break down. I'll check on that one. I'd love to see the report on that, because I've seen the report saying otherwise. Okay.
How is it that the health of people involved here, who are being affected by those herbicides, does not come before the economic viability of a farm?
I guess what I would say is that we have done tests at the national level, whether you trust them or not, and we've done tests that I've seen around the country that don't show that danger to people that you're talking about, or they wouldn't put them on. FDA has the total control to it.
Let's have a little response to that, folks. Let's start here.
The people who work at the highest levels at the FDA have also worked at the highest levels of companies like Monsanto. It's a revolving door. Okay, so then how can you trust the results when they're connected? When
the lawyer of Monsanto
is being allowed to give its own reports about whether what they do with seeds and with planting and with herbicides is dangerous or not. Of course, they're going to say it's no, and so the FDA says it's no also. I mean, it's a totally...
Let's get a couple more here.
I don't think the federal government has the funding for FDA to do its own research, and so they use the research that comes out of the companies. And if you happen to watch Genetic Roulette, some of the people who have worked for these big ag research companies are reporting they've had to leave the company in order to get out the results of their own research. And a lot of it does show very bad health effects for animals and people over time. But another thing I wanted to mention, when the canola bill was passed, the ODA, I heard the ODA said they weren't really able to control, or they were the ones that decided, and the decision was not made in a way that was protective of the area farms.
The organic seed farmers, that there's a $20 million a year business of organic seeds.
It's actually bigger than that.
How big is it?
I can't remember. It's more than 20 million. It's one of the largest economic ones in our valley.
And what's your answer to the
the
seed farmers that are crying out for help here? The organic seed farmers that have come to you over and over again.
I think we have to make sure that they have excluded certain brassicas.